let's see, what else? What about those file permissions? We saw those when we did ls-l earlier. We saw our file permissions, and I mentioned we had read, write, execute, read, write, execute, read, write, execute. So 3 sets of permissions. So read, write, and execute makes sense, right? We can read the file, we can write to the file, we can execute the file. Probably executing this text file called my file won't make anything particularly interesting happen, but reading and writing it might be interesting. What if it stored passwords for some program? Having read access to it would be something that would be definitely cool. What if it was, say, source code for a web server and we wanted to deface someone's website? Having write access would be very, very interesting. What if it was a password decryptor, so it was used by a program to take a password hash and make sure whether it was right and like throw out a secret key at the end or give you access to like a key to open up additional functionality that you should have to pay for. Being able to execute it when you shouldn't would be something we'd want to do. So having extra permissions that you shouldn't on files is a valid way of getting access to a system, or more access than you had, something like local privilege escalation. It happens. Certainly people develop programs and give too much permissions. I've been guilty of that, certainly. I've certainly set things to full access for everybody when I shouldn't have, because it's easier than coming up with what should be the right permissions. And I'd certainly rather spend my time actually developing stuff than developing it securely. That's generally the problem with security. You don't get medals for making things secure, you get medals for writing cool stuff. So, a little off topic there. But, so we've got a read, write, execute, and 3 sets. So the first one, the one on the left, is the owner. The owner is root. The second set is the group, so anyone else who was in the root group besides root would have read and execute permissions on this directory, whereas root, the user itself, would have read, write, and execute permissions. And then the third set is everybody else, or the world, so everybody can read and execute. So on my file, it looks like we have read, write permissions for root, just read permissions for the group, and just read permissions for the world. So what if we want to change those? We can change permissions on files that we own, or if we're root, we can change permissions on anything. Don't go crazy on changing permissions. I think it was in actually probably one of my first security classes, we were supposed to make a secure system, or we were basically doing attack and defend in the class, and I had a Linux system, and I was like, oh, I'll just take away the file permissions from everything, so if somebody gets on it, they can't use it. Well, unfortunately, neither could the programs that are on here that have to read files, like their configuration files, the operating system itself suddenly had problems functioning. So you should probably stick to your own files just to keep from having to wipe this thing out and start over. But as root, we can change any file permissions that we want. So how we do that is with chmod. We have a few different ways of using chmod. So what we can do is we can use, the way I usually do it is like this, give it numbers. So there is a chart in your slides. So if you look at the slides for this section, I don't have them up right now, but if you look at the slides, there is a table that shows the integer values for chmod. So it goes all the way from 0 to 7. 7 is full permissions, 0 is no permissions. And execute only is 1, write only is 2, write and execute is 3, so you can think of it in terms of binary, and again that's in the slide as well, so it's just a binary representation. And read only is 4, read and execute is 5, read and write is 6, and again 7 is full. And if you don't remember those, again it's in the slide, but honestly I Google it all the time. 7 and 0 are obviously easy to remember, but some of the ones in the middle, you'll probably forget them. So, no problem there. So what we can do is say I want, how about I do 7, 5, 0, so 1 digit for each. So we've got owner, group, and everyone. So owner should have full permissions, so read, write, and execute. What did we say 5 was? Read and execute. So the group should have read and execute permissions, and the 0 is nothing. So everyone should have no permissions. We do our ls-l again. Looks like exactly what happened. So we have read, write, execute, read and execute, and nothing. So we can change those, and you can use different values. There are other ways of doing it, like we could do like ch mod plus x would add execute permissions for everybody. So now we have execute permissions for everybody. I find the digit way is the easiest, but there are certainly other ways to do it. So, I mean, the main point is if you have sensitive files, we want to make sure that we don't give them too many permissions. That would be. So, let's see. What else? How about data manipulation? That's something that we certainly need to know. So I'm going to use Nano and open up my file. And I'm just going to create something here. I just deleted the text. Let's see. Let's put in, how about some conferences? Who doesn't love security conferences? How about, well, the first one I ever went to and the first one I ever spoke at, ShmooCon. And that is typically in like February or January. And I don't know how to spell February, so January it is. And let's see, Black Hat, that's always a big one. Hopefully I can spell Black Hat. And that's typically in July or August. July is easier to spell. Let's see, I went to this one in Norway once called HackCon. That was really fun. And that was in April. Always like to go to interesting places. BrewCon's a good one too in Belgium. This is by no means like a complete list, obviously. These are just a few that are popping into my mind. And let's see, how about one more? Let's not do DEF CON, because I'll need that one later. How about Hacker Halted? I'll do it as one word, because it'll screw up my chart otherwise, and that's typically in, I think, October. So I've just got a set of conferences and when they are typically held. I'll save that, so that, again, Control X, and this time Y for yes for saving. Of course, I can cat out that file. And what if we want to do some data manipulation? What if I only want to see the conference names? What if I need to throw out all of the months? Do I have to edit it and line by line get rid of it? I mean, with this many, that wouldn't be that big of a deal. But it certainly could be if it was a really long file. So luckily, no, we have other options. We can cat out my file. Pipe it into grep, so that shift and then the bar is a pipe. So that's going to take the output of cat my file and then pipe it as input into whatever my next command is. I'm going to pipe it into grep. And it doesn't like that. And I'm not sure why it doesn't like that. It should. But what I can also do is I can actually grep. Oh, duh. I just figured out what I did wrong. So, open to grep. What did I do wrong? I didn't tell it what I wanted to grep for. So, no matter how long you use Linux, you'll keep making mistakes, particularly in videos. So, if that's the only mistake I make, then we'll be good. So, grep is going to look for a specific pattern, and it wants an actual pattern for me to look for. I didn't give it any pattern, so I just didn't know what to do, so it gave me usage information. So if I grep for, say, what if I want just a B? We'll grab everything that has a B in it, so Black Hat and BrewCon. And I mentioned I could also do, if I wanted to grab just the first part of the line. There's a few different ways to do this. I like cut. So I'm going to say cut with the delimiter, -D is space, and -F for the field. And I want field 1. And that'll grab just the first field. I can also like string more of these together, so I could do cat my file, grep for B, pipe that, so another pipe into cut, delimiter, space, field is 2, and that'll get just the months for those two that start with B's or have a B in them. And of course we can also put these into a file, like my file 2. So that'll take the results and put them in a file. In some cases you might have like long lists that have more than one of the same thing. So say if I did, not the case here, but particularly when I'm working with IP addresses and I only want like unique entries, this comes up. So I put in like shmoocon again, and January. And if I did just my cut, so there's 2 Januaries in here. So if I typed it again and did sort -u, now we see that there's only 1 January. So that took only unique entries there. So that's a little something extra that would be nice, because if I only want one, I don't want overlaps. There are certainly other ways to manipulate data. Like there's sed and awk and lots of different other ones that you can use. I have found that I can do pretty much everything I want to do with cut and grep, but perhaps I'm just simple about what I want to do. So you can certainly look at other manipulators like sed, awk. There's other ones as well for what you want to do. So whatever works for you. You know, but generally I find that the best way to learn how to use Linux, or anything for that matter, is to just use it, and every time you come up against something you don't know how to do, instead of switching back to Windows or your Mac, you can figure it out. Go on Google. StackOverflow.com generally has answers to everything, so it's worth checking out. So a few more miscellaneous things with Linux, and then we'll move on. So how about installing packages? How we do that on this particular flavor of Linux, there are other versions that use like RPM instead of apt-get, but on this one, if we wanted to install a package that wasn't installed on here, but it had an entry in the repositories, I do apt-get install, and then for instance Armitage. It's going to install our Armitage. We're not going to use Armitage in this class, but Armitage is basically a front end for Metasploit, and it is good for using with Teams, so something you might want to check out. Again, we're not going to use it in this particular class, but it is an interesting tool that you might find worth spending your time on. So if we do, let's see, what else? How about services? So currently we don't have anything listening on any ports anywhere. If I do a netstat-antp, it says we were at some point talking to probably those web servers or the repositories for Kali to get Armitage, but we don't have any listening ports right now. So, and if you're not familiar with the port, it's not the Ethernet port on the back of the computer, though I did once have a manager at work who thought so, back when I had a job. But these are just going to be network sockets, so there are 65,535 TCP and 65,535 UDP, so you can imagine how that would be rather cumbersome on the back of a laptop. But again, these are just going to be network sockets, so we open up a socket that we could listen on for incoming data or call out to another socket. So we'll see that a lot in this class, so no worries there. But currently there's nothing listening, but what's something we might want to have listening? How about a web server? What if we wanted to serve web pages? Well, luckily Kali comes with a web server installed, so we don't have to worry about setting one up. What we would do is service Apache 2 and start.